And we're recording. All right. With me today is a distinguished gentleman named Richard Shinn, who was part of the U.S. Coast Guard and was a lighthouse keeper for a while. It's a great honor to finally meet you over the screen here. How you doing, sir?
Fine, great, finally.
Yeah, it took a little bit of doing in order to get this, but I kind of want to know about a little bit about you before you joined the Coast Guard. Like, where were you born? What state did you grow up in?
Well, we'll start from the beginning. Born in New Jersey,
Okay.
a town by the name of Haddon Heights, which was a commuter town to Philadelphia, basically. And the people either farmers or worked in the big city of Philadelphia and
Hmm.
went by train. And of course, that was in 1928 when I was first hatched. But we lived there, and then finally in 1945, at the end of World War II, my dad just decided up and out of New Jersey, and we moved to Florida with a little two-wheel trailer pulling behind us with all of our belongings in it, in a two-wheel
Wow.
trailer, two sisters and a dog and a cat, and ended up in Clearwater, Florida. And then a year later, my dad acquired a boat, not a ramp, but a dock, fishing dock,
Hmm.
at that time considered to be the largest individually run marina on the west coast of Florida. It's been superseded by its own town now. At that time, it was just a big one. And so that's where I worked and worked around small craft. And we also had a little seafood restaurant on there. And so my grandmother, the old German, she did the cooking. And then I did whatever needed to be done. And my dad was the talker. And we had all kind of luminaries there. Even August Bush, the owner of Bush Bavarian Beer,
Hmm. Sure.
original, he would come down. He'd call from
Wow.
I think it's Minnesota or someplace up there where they brewed the beer.
St. Louis is where they had the main.
Say be in town such and such, and he'd like to have a table for six at 8 o'clock on Tuesday. So
Wow.
sure enough, we'd have it all done for him. So that was the way we got it started, and then we uh, got rid of it and then opened a restaurant in downtown Clearwater, and we call it Shinn's Marine Grill, and I was there until 1950 and shucking oysters and clams and talking to the people as well as did my dad. And then, of course, the Korean War started, and I had a couple of options: either go in the Army, the Navy, the Marine, or the Air Corps, whatever. And I had been working on the boat docks, as I said previous to that. I had a license for hailing small craft up to 65 foot
Okay.
uh, commercially. And so I said, I'd like to get in that. And so I went to the Air Force because they had small craft boats, 95 footers that they would use for crash boats,
Okay.
downed aircraft. So I went over to Tampa to the recruiting center and talked to them. And then the recruiting officer said, okay. So he said, excuse me. And he went in the
It's
back.
1:30.
He went in the back room. Yeah. And was going about 2 minutes and finally came back out. And they said, well, he said, we have an opening for a quartermaster. He said, but he said, you'll have to leave tomorrow morning. I said, I can't do that. I can't walk out with my dad in 12 hours.
Right.
Give me 2 weeks. So I can't give you 2 weeks. Well, okay. So I walked out the door. So I said, well, it's the Coast Guard. They have small, they have small boats. So, and they had more of their boats up at our dock a few times when they'd be patrolling out there in the Gulf.
Hmm.
And so anyway, I went over there and they said, sure, we'll take you. So I signed the paper. 2 weeks later, I was on a train, which no longer is there in the Clearwater, Florida area. But we went to the East Coast and we met a few more guys that were also recruits. And we went on up to Cape May where we got our preliminary training. And that was an experience for myself, but that's another story. But anyway, we got out there and I was assigned to a temporary additional duty, TAD, at the base down in Miami, which originally had been a dirigible base for World War II for blimps to go overhead looking for submarines.
Okay.
So anyway, I was there for 3 weeks, and then they called us out on muster one morning. So we're all lined up two lines, and the officer came out and greeted us. And he said, I have a couple of bases going to have to be filled now, positions. So I'll call out positions that we have available. So he said, well, we need keepers for lighthouse duty. Please, if there's any volunteers, please step forward. I step forward. So finally, I said, well, with my damn German personality and background, I said, with my luck, I'd probably be it. So he said, he repeated one more time. I'd like repeat one more time. Do we have any volunteers? I said, well, what the heck? So I stepped forward. So yeah, I know the next day I had a sea bag over my shoulders and heading on a Greyhound bus for Marathon, Florida.
Wow.
And it was a couple-hour ride. So we got down there with Marathon, just a little fishing village. We pulled into the gas station, grocery store combination. And I got off the bus, and there was a fellow there with a T-shirt, a white T-shirt, and bell-bottom Levi's on. And he said, "Are you Shinn?" I said, "Yes." He said, well, I'm McVeigh. We're out here at the lighthouse. I said, "Oh, okay, good." I had no idea what I was getting into. And so
had you ever even been to a lighthouse before this?
No. So
oh boy.
And followed him. We went through the mangroves there on the opposite side of US 1. That should be on the east side, in other words, because the islands are going north, the roads are going north and south there, east and west. So the road was heading east and west there. So we got on the north side of it, and still going through the mangroves there. Now we go up to a little alcove there, and there's boats. Mm-hmm. I mean, a boat, a little dock about 10 foot by 10 foot. Little boat moored there. It's a little double ender. There were two-ended bows. Mm-hmm. And then the steering wheel was a rudder sticking out over the rear end of it. A little hatch in the middle and a little cabin forward of that. So we got in the boat and dislodged it and cranked her up and went on winding through more groves and finally got out in the ocean. So then I'm looking around, I don't see any lighthouse. And so we start heading one direction, which actually was probably just about a little bit west of north. I mean, yeah, a little bit west of north. And I looked way up in the horizon, there's a little thing sticking up in the water. And I said, "That's it." He said, "Oh yeah, that's it." So it took us about half an hour to get out there.
Okay, so when you see this little thing coming up on the horizon, what are your thoughts? You see this little thing, what could possibly be going through your head?
I didn't worry about life. I didn't worry about anything, I
you just take it as it comes.
I was going to get into it, I mean, so I just went ahead and sat there and waited until we got out there. And then we got to the light. That was a shocker, because how do you get out of the boat? Still, so to speak, mm-hmm. the work platform, then above it, the next platform up was the quarters with a light above that. And so anyway, we pulled up to the stanchions sticking down in the water there, the post. There was a rung ladder going up the side of one of the posts. Mm-hmm. And so he had me climb up that ladder to the deck. And then he stayed in the boat, and they dropped lines down with two block and tackles up on the deck, and then secured him to the bow and to the stern. And he got out of the boat, climbed up the ladder. And so I was on one job on one winch. They were all handled by hand. They weren't electric like they were a few years later.
Okay.
And so had to crank them, and we raised the boat up to the deck, and then we pulled it in and had big straps made out of canvas that went under the belly of the boat, and we were able to secure it so it wouldn't be able to move back and forth while it was hanging there. Mm-hmm. If the winds picked up, it could do a lot of damage. So anyway, that was it. And that was my introduction, and to see the quarters, which were evenly divided into four,
Mm-hmm.
the square little building, and the one quarter had the officer in charge bed and so forth. Then the second quarter was for the enlisted men, which would be three of us. And then the third quarter was the galley, also where we had an anemometer for the checking the wind velocity and direction and so forth. Then the ship to shore radio, as well as the refrigerator and the stove.
Okay.
And then the fourth one was where the two engines were for running the batteries, keeping them charged.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it. So I was introduced to the members. There was never more than three men on there at one time because there was only four men. And we took what we called compensatory liberty, which meant every month we got 7-8 days off. We could go ashore wherever we wanted. And so there's always a minimum of one man. There's supposed to be two men on there all the time. But it didn't always work out that way because of storms or other reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that was the way it started. So there was nothing out of the ordinary that way as far as I was concerned. It was just a new experience. I enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
And they changed crews every so often, one at a time. They would never exit altogether because that way they wanted somebody that knew what they were doing.
Sure.
To handle the chores. And the officer in charge's name was Wiley Aldrich. He was first class bosun's mate. And he was one guy you wouldn't want to run into in the dark. If you just saw him, he'd scare the hell out of him. Pussycat.
Really?
Nice and but he was in charge. And then we had a fireman and a engineman and a seaman. Well, that was me, and I was a recruit. I'm sorry, a apprentice. I was an apprentice at that time.
Okay.
And so anyway, that way our life settled down. So we'd take turns cooking, and you never argued, never complained about the cook. That was one thing you never did. You ate was whatever was put in front of you. They were always simple meals.
Sure.
But anyway, we would sit there in the one room and study and play cards, and that was the last time I ever played cards in my life. Anyway, that was basically it. And we got along real well. Never had any trouble with any of the men there. We go ashore, and that was another experience in itself. There was only one teenage girl there in the entire town, of which was about 100, a couple of hundred, I guess. At that time, it was before they got built up. That was Marathon in its prime. In fact,
and that was what year?
I beg your pardon?
What year was this?
1950. The last part of December of 1950. So I was there from 50 to 50, beginning of 52. And there was just the one young gal there, but none of us ever dated her. But she would call out to us on the phone, because we had to have a phone landline. And
Looks like we lost you.
And
you're back. I lost you there for a second. The screen froze for a second. So we lost you when you were saying that none of the crew dated the 15-year or the teenager.
Yeah, we just didn't date her, and we just stayed to ourselves. But she would call us out on a light and speak to us, and we'd do it for company.
Sure.
And once a month we when we got our money. We got paid once a month. We got also compensatory monies toward chow and so forth. Because
really?
Duty.
Yeah.
So then we go down to Miami to the Key West. I said Miami. I meant Key West, down there to the naval station. And they had a big commissary there. So we'd go ahead and buy our big groceries there. Well, it didn't always work out. We would do that part all right. But then when we get back to the boat, the wind would have picked up and the waves are chopping, and we can't get the boat back out to the light.
Sure.
So then we're forced to stay there. So we had to stay overnight. Well, fortunately for us, the boatswain's family was there. His wife and two young sons were there, and they had a little house.
Oh, that's
so
nice.
They always had a bed rigged up for us.
That's very nice.
We always managed to sleep overnight if we had a problem.
So when you had your compensatory week off, is that Key West is where you always went?
Repeat that again.
When you had your compensatory week off, did you always go to Key West or did you ever go anywhere else?
Oh no, I went home.
Oh,
Couldn't
really?
get on a Greyhound bus and go there and then come back. And so that was enjoyable. I had no problem with that. Sometimes, getting back to the story about the boat,
Hmm.
which is rough, we could then need the groceries. Well, we go out there and we go under the catwalk, which extended out over the side of the light. If you ever seen pictures of light, you might see the catwalk that sticks out.
Right.
And so, man up on the deck would be standing there with a bucket on a rope, and then we pass under the catwalk. He would drop the bucket down, and we'd dump as much of the groceries into the bucket as we could. Then he'd haul it up. We'd keep right on going
Mm.
and go around a big circle, and then come back under again with the waves chopping and bouncing us up and down. But we didn't dare go any closer because we could get smashed against the bulkhead there, the post. And so then when we got that done, we go back to shore, and that's when we'd spend the night.
Oh, okay.
Then the next day, if it was calm, then we went back out to the light.
Hmm.
And one time we were there when they had a hurricane. I think it was 1951, and that was kind of an experience. And the wind really picked up. Of course, we prepare for the storm by closing all the hatches. When I say hatches, I mean stored iron doors, which are
Hmm.
completely doors, no openings, no glass to look through or anything. You have your regular French doors, but then these would swing shut from outside of that. And there was a bar that would go across the door to keep from coming open.
Hmm.
So once we got in there, we were sealed in there for the duration of the storm.
Wow.
It was listen and see, on the radio what was going on, and then look at the anemometer spinning around, and then just sweat it on out. Well, then the waves would be smashing up against the light, and they would vibrate the light, make it like a tuning fork.
Hmm.
So, and that would last for hours. But you're completely, depending on the lights inside it for illumination. So that was basically it. And then we had some unusual times. One time I was going ashore down to Key West for the groceries, and the boatswain's uh, daughter went with us to buy stuff also. And so she had her little baby boy with her.
Hmm.
So that we were all crammed into this little car, no problem going down. But then turn around, coming back, the boy was on my lap. Well, then he decided he had to urinate. I had my whites on,
Sad.
so my crotch was thoroughly soaked by the time I got back to the light. And one bad time we had was when we had a fellow from the USS hydrographer from St. Petersburg, which is a ship that was used to uh, coordinate spots in the water,
Hmm.
which, from one place to another. And they would go ahead and measure the depth of the water in a given place. And then this one individual by the name of Bernie, and he was a heck of a nice guy. And he was probably in his 50s, I guess. But this young guy that was with him was one of the ones that came, was very unusual. He was small, underweight, black wavy hair. And we don't know yet how he could do it, but he could take a complete deck of cards and have you hold them, and he could tell you what card you're looking at. We haven't figured out to this day. I haven't figured out. We could take him out of a cigar box.
Uh-huh.
We could shuffle him, do anything we wanted. He could tell us every card, never missed one.
Really?
But he was also a mean bugger. He was not easy to get along with.
Okay.
And so this one day, we had one kid on our, I won't give his last name, but we call him Hoop. He was
Hoop?
kind of like a Mickey Rooney or Andy Hardy type of the movies, bubbling and bouncing, blonde hair and so forth, big old grin on his face all the time. And he was an engineman. And he came on after I did.
Mm-hmm.
And he just come out of high school and gone right in. I've been out of high school 7 years when I went into the Coast Guard. But anyway, he came out there, and this one day he was shaving, which was a laugh. But he only had maybe 20 hairs on his whole entire face. This individual came up behind him with a knife in his hand and then held it right in front of his throat when the kid was in front of the mirror trying to shave.
Gosh.
And I yelled at him and said, "Stop it right now." So he looked at me, and then he finally put the knife down. And so then that night, we had to sleep in the same room, that one little quarter I was talking about.
Sure.
I was in an upper bunk, and there's 4 bunks in that room, and he was the one on across that little room. I heard the springs squeak, and I opened my eyes, looked, and it was him.
Mm-hmm.
He was coming right toward me, and just as he got to me, I kind of jumped out and hit him at the same time with my feet.
Ooh.
And knocked him down. And then the other fellow real quick woke up and grabbed him too. So between the two, we got him tied. And then we had to kept him that way that night. And then the next day we called Miami. Oh, excuse me, here I go again. Key West.
Uh-huh.
And so they sent a boat up, patrol boat. And so they went and got him, hauled him off.
Wow.
So that was one experience.
That is an experience. My gosh.
Another experience was I was standing out on the deck looking out at the sea because freighters and cargo ships are all going past us all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So we see these ships. This one day I saw something bobbing in the water. I couldn't figure out what it was. So I got the field glasses out and went look, and here it was, World War II mine bobbing on the surface of the water. And it was heading in our direction.
Oh, great.
These were pushing it in. So I called one of my buddies. We real quick got the double ender and dropped it down in the water. And so we went out to intercept it. And so we got, and fortunately the waves weren't that high. They were just kind of like swells. And so I was able to tie a line around the point sticking out.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got tied, and then we towed it behind the boat. So we got back to the light and made sure we kept it off the boat. I mean, off the light, away from the light. And then we called Key West. So they real quick brought a craft up there to retrieve it the next day. But that was
the next day,
loaded or not. We don't, because World War II had only been over 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And they mined it. Because down in Key West, they had all those ships. They had the submarine tenders. Submarines came from port to be outfitted and everything. So that was quite active.
So when you went out to retrieve the mine, you just lashed a rope around it and just basically hauled it back? Jeez. How close to the boat
when
was
you're
it?
young, you do these things, you know?
Yeah, exactly. How close to the boat was it?
I beg your pardon?
How close to the boat was it?
Well, I had to lean out to be able to touch it and everything, the line and everything, you know, but it was just swells, as they say. It wasn't rough. If it had been rough, I wouldn't be able to do it. And so another experience there was one day I heard somebody yelling out from the water, you know. I couldn't understand. I just heard this voice yelling. So I went out on the deck and looked, and down the boat, there was a boat, little kind of a rowboat type thing with an outboard on it. And I saw these kids on board, 3 of them, on this little boat. They're yelling up. So I was trying to find out what they were trying to tell me. Well, it turned out one of them had been shot through the foot with a spear.
Ooh.
Out spear fishing off the reef.
Mm-hmm.
And Sombrero Reef got its name because it's kind of shaped like a sombrero. That's where the name Sombrero came from. And then just beyond that, it was just deep water. with reefs sticking up, individual reefs, which was the most beautiful thing to see when you were swimming in there with all the types of coral and fish and so forth. But anyway, that's another story. And anyway, real quick, went down, dropped the gangway down, which was ordinarily held up. So we get down to the level of the boat, and the fellow's name was Ray Steiner, and this kid was 6'4", tall kid, and then another was Wingy. I can't remember his first name, but his name was Wingy, and the third guy, Debu. And turned out this Debu was a wise guy, trying to cock the spear gun, and it misfired. And then Steiner was just sitting there, and it went right through his foot, just above the and right in his leg, So we got Ray aboard the light, helped him up there, got him on deck. Well, I didn't know what else to do. I could figure out just about 6 inches was sticking out one side and a foot and a half out the other side, which was twisting his leg because of the weight of it. So I just took a hacksaw and sawed off even. You can imagine the vibrations.
Oh, I can't imagine the pain.
Again, we had to call Miami. And the funny part of this is, after I left the light and when ended up going to this Androscoggin in Miami, and I was Ocean's Bait by that time, and I got on there. Two of my crew members were Ray Steiner, and Lindsay.
Come on.
Yeah, they had enlisted after me, or they had just gotten out of high school, and then they liked the way I did it and everything. They decided to try the Coast Guard, so here they were. Now I'm their boss.
That's pretty cool.
And so it was, all kinds of things. Then swimming in the water when you get down deep, you're looking at the coral sticking up from the right and the left with sandy bottom in between. And then one day I'm down there looking, and here goes a shark right past me, and I'm just holding my breath watching it with my goggles on. We didn't have face masks or anything. And we just had to go up to the surface and grab air. The shark just swam right past me. I just looked at him go by. No problem. Another time was a Jewfish, and that weighed about 60 pounds, I guess. And he went by, and manta rays. It was beautiful. Plus all the millions of little fish darting in and out among the reefs. And one day when I was down there swimming with my buddy there, and we never wore anything gaudy. We took our ID bracelets off because they flashed light reflection in the water. So we were down in the water, and I was looking around, and here's probably about 10 to 15 barracuda in a circle around me.
Oh boy.
And they're just opening their mouths and closing them very slowly. And I just watched them. And I went too far from the ladder, which was hanging down from the catwalk that I was telling you about earlier, where you just walked out. And so I was watching them, and they were all just watching me. They're as curious as me as I was of them.
Sure.
And so all of a sudden, I saw one of them was moving his mouth, but was agitated.
Oh, boy.
Moving back and forth from side to side, and the mouth was opening and shutting in rapid succession. About that time, it came right at me. And I just moved my head a little bit to the right and went right over my left shoulder. Well, that's about all it took to get me grab a hold of that rope ladder.
And I was fly up there.
But the reason I was even in the water was because earlier in the year, I guess it was, maybe a year before, we had a group from Florida State University come visit us, and these were marine biologists.
Okay.
And they were studying things, fish and coral and so forth in the area. And I was up on the top of the light where I could get a good look and see what they were doing, looking down on them. Well, there's barracuda out in the water with them and all that. And they were just swimming around. And so when they finally came aboard the light, I said, "Aren't you afraid of the barracuda?" Because I had never been with them. No, they don't bother you. Well, that was what I found, because if you move toward them, they move back. If you move back, they move forward. But that one was the exception.
Yeah. You found the one angry one.
That those are some of the things that happen when you don't expect on a
Yeah.
lighthouse. So that was almost 2 years on there. And then when the time came to, I also studied for my bosun's mate rating, my correspondence and so forth. That's one of the more serious sides there, preparing for your next rating. So I became third class bosun's mate. And that was when they decided it was time for me to leave the lighthouse. And so that was basically the story. I was given my notice that I would report for duty down at Miami Beach at the WPG 68 Annual Scholarship, which is a high class cutter class. Coast Guard. She'd been built in 46. That was a young ship. And incidentally, a boat, a lot of people must call anything a boat.
It
gets sickly from talking. But anyway, the difference between a boat and a ship is a boat is something you get into when a ship is sinking. Unless it's a submarine, that's a boat, a U-boat. But otherwise, boats are where you get into when all else fails. Anyway, that was it. So that was the end of my experiences on the life and the entrance to another life with a cutter system.